I am Julius Clayton, 72 years old. 3 weeks ago, my daughter-in-law threw me out of the house I had lived in for 40 years. She did it just days after my wife's funeral. She gave me exactly 30 minutes to pack one bag. Today, I am a 72-year-old Uber driver. I am broke, I am humiliated, and I am invisible. But 5 minutes ago, a billionaire got into the back of my Toyota. He looked at my face in the rearview mirror, and he started to cry. He asked me one question. A question about a father I never knew. A question that just changed everything. Before I tell you what he asked me and what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that justice, no matter how late, must always be served. The world ended on a Tuesday. It ended with the sound of a long, solid beep. The kind of sound that cuts through a hospital room and silences everything else. The rhythmic blip of the heart monitor tracking my wife Amara. It just stopped. It became a flat line. I was holding her hand. The same hand I had held for 50 years. The hand that gripped mine when our son Andre was born. The hand that waved goodbye to me every morning for 40 years as I pulled out of the driveway in my AC Transit bus uniform. Now it was cold. I am 72 years old. I am a retired bus driver. And I am a widower. I buried my face in the hospital blanket, and I felt an emptiness so total it felt like my own chest had stopped. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour, maybe 2. Then the door to the room opened. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. Dad. That was Andre, my son. His voice was hesitant, weak, but the voice that followed his was sharp. Dad, where's the life insurance policy? I looked up. My daughter-in-law Tiffany was standing there. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight professional bun. Her gray pantsuit was perfectly pressed. She looked like she had just come from a real estate closing, not a hospital deathbed. Her eyes were cold and they were scanning the room, calculating. She did not look at Amara. She looked at me. Where is the will? She asked again. The hospital's billing department needs to talk about the costs. We need to get everything in order. Andre shifted behind her, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his eyes glued to the white linoleum floor. Tiffany, come on. Not now. No now, Andre, she snapped. Her voice was like ice. This is exactly the time. This is business. We have to be practical. Dad, the paperwork. Where is it? I looked at this woman who had married my son. I had tried so hard to like her. When Andre first brought her home, this ambitious white woman from the suburbs, I thought it doesn't matter as long as she loves him. But Tiffany doesn't love. Tiffany acquires. She acquired my son, and she always looked down on us. She hated our little house in Rockridge. She hated that I was just a bus driver. How quaint, she'd once said. Amara saw it. Amara warned me. Julius, she'd said, that woman only sees dollar signs. She doesn't see people. And now my wife wasn't even cold, and Tiffany was already hunting for the dollar signs. In the desk, I whispered. My throat felt like it was full of sand. In her metal lockbox. Thank you, Tiffany said with a curt nod. I'll go get it right now. Andre, you stay here with your father. She turned, and the click, click, click of her high heels on the hospital floor was the only sound. It sounded like a hammer hitting a nail. Andre just stood there in the doorway looking helpless. The grief I felt was a physical weight, but underneath it a new feeling was starting to grow. A cold, sharp chill of fear. My 50-year partner was gone, and I was alone with them. 1 week later, the house was silent, suffocatingly silent. After the funeral, everyone had left. The casseroles had stopped coming. It was just me and the quiet. Every corner of this house held a memory of Amara. Her smell still lingered in the curtains. Her gardening boots were still by the back door. I was sitting at the kitchen table trying to make sense of a mountain of mail. Bills, medical statements from Kaiser, letters of condolence. It was all a blur. Amara had always handled the finances. She balanced the checkbook. She paid the bills. I just drove the bus and brought home the paycheck. Now I was 72 and staring at a language I didn't understand. There was a knock on the door. It was Tiffany. She came in alone, holding an expensive leather briefcase. Andre's in a big meeting, she said. She sat down at the table opposite me. She looked sympathetic. It was an expression she wore like a mask. Dad, she started in a soft voice. I know this is all overwhelming. She gestured to the pile of bills. I took the liberty of looking at the finances. It's a lot. The hospice care was incredibly expensive. There are copays and prescription costs that insurance didn't cover. The creditors are going to start calling. My head started to spin. Creditors. I'd never owed anyone anything. Amara and I had paid this house off. We had my pension. We were supposed to be set. I've talked to my lawyer, Tiffany continued, her voice smooth and reasonable. The best way to protect you, and to protect the family's assets, is for me to handle all this for you. She placed a thick stack of papers on the table. You shouldn't have to deal with this stress. You're grieving. She slid one document out from the stack and put it in front of me along with a pen. What is this? I asked. It's a durable power of attorney, she said quickly. It's simple. It just gives me the authority to talk to the banks on your behalf. It lets me speak to the credit card companies and the hospital billing department. I can consolidate these debts, negotiate them down. It's just a tool to protect you. You're 72, Dad. You need to rest. You don't need to be fighting with collection agencies. I hesitated. I looked at the document. All I saw was legal jargon. Fiduciary. Incapacitated. Grantor. A voice in my head. Amara's voice whispered, "Be careful, Julius. Read the fine print." But I was just so tired. The grief was a fog that made thinking impossible. I looked at the mountain of angry red envelopes on my table. I just wanted the noise to stop. I trusted my son. Andre was smart, went to college, and he trusted her. He must know what he's doing. It's for the best, Dad, Andre had said on the phone earlier. Just let Tiffany handle it. She knows this stuff. So I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. Where? I asked. Just here, Tiffany said, pointing, and here, initial here, and sign here at the bottom. I signed my name, Julius Clayton, the name I'd had for 72 years. I had no idea I was signing my entire life away. The instant the last signature was on the page, her entire demeanor changed. The mask of sympathy evaporated. It was replaced by a brisk, cold efficiency. She snatched the papers, slid them into her briefcase, and snapped it shut. The sound was like a trap springing. Wonderful, she said, standing up. Now I can get to work. She walked to the kitchen door and then paused as if a thought had just struck her. Oh, by the way, Dad, she said, her voice casual, too casual. Andre and I were talking. This house, she waved a hand around my kitchen. It's way too big for just one person. 3 bedrooms, a big yard, the maintenance. The property taxes in Alameda County are only going up. It's a waste. My stomach tightened. This is my home, Tiffany. Amara and I built this life here. I know, she said, but you need to be practical. You should really think about downsizing, getting a small condo, something manageable. I felt a flash of anger, the first real emotion besides grief I'd felt in weeks. I am not leaving my home. This conversation is over. Tiffany didn't argue. She just smiled, a cold, thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. Okay, Dad, she said. Just a thought. We're just trying to look out for your best interest. She left. And I sat alone in that silent kitchen. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was threatening. And for the first time in 40 years, I felt unsafe in my own home. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of hollow, echoing quiet. I tried to find a new routine. I tried to learn how to cook for one. I failed. I spent most of my time just sitting in Amara's favorite armchair. That morning, I'd finally gotten the courage to do the one thing I'd been dreading. I went upstairs to our bedroom and I opened Amara's closet. Her scent hit me first, lavender and soap. I reached out and touched the sleeve of her favorite gardening sweater. I pulled it from the hanger and buried my face in it, breathing her in. And I just broke. I slid down to the floor of the closet, holding her sweater, and I wept. I wept for her. I wept for my old life. That's when I heard it. A loud scraping sound from downstairs, a heavy thud that shook the house. I froze. Then I heard a man's voice, a voice I didn't know. Okay, start with the living room. Get the big stuff first, the sofa and the TV. My blood ran cold. I wiped my face, got to my feet, and ran down the stairs. My front door was wide open. Tiffany was standing in my living room holding a clipboard. 2 huge men in matching blue uniforms were standing next to her. They were from a moving company. One of them was already starting to wrap Amara's armchair in plastic. "What is this?" I stammered. "What are you doing?" Tiffany didn't even look up from her clipboard. "Please don't make this difficult, Dad. We're on a schedule." "Difficult," I yelled, my voice cracking. "You are bringing strangers into my house. Get out. Get out of my house." "Stop," I said to the mover who was tilting the armchair. He just looked at Tiffany. She sighed a long, impatient sigh and finally looked at me. Her eyes were hard as stones. "This isn't your house anymore," she said. "What are you talking about? Andre, where is Andre?" "Andre is at the bank finalizing the paperwork," she said. "We found a buyer, an all-cash offer closing today. They want the property vacant by 5 p.m. My knees felt weak. I grabbed the doorframe to hold myself up. "A buyer, I told you I am not selling my home." And then she laughed, a short, cold sound. "Oh, Dad," she said, walking toward me. She tapped the designer handbag on her shoulder. "You did agree, right at that kitchen table 3 weeks ago." She smiled. "That power of attorney you signed, it wasn't just to talk to the banks. It gives me full authority to make all financial decisions on your behalf. And selling this oversized, tax-draining house was the first and best decision. The house is sold, Dad. Legally." "No," I whispered. It couldn't be real. "No, Andre wouldn't." Just then, Andre's BMW pulled into the driveway. He got out wearing his expensive suit. He walked up the path and stopped when he saw me standing in the doorway and the movers in the living room. "Andre," I cried a desperate plea. "Andre, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you are not letting her do this to me, to our home." Andre stood there. He looked at the ground. He looked at his wife. He looked at me, his eyes empty. "Dad," he said, his voice low. "She's right. It's for the best. The house it's just too much for you to handle. We found you a new place." "A new place?" I echoed. "It's a very nice studio apartment," Tiffany cut in, her voice bright and cheerful. "A senior living community in Emeryville. It's much more manageable, and it's closer to us so we can take care of you." I looked at my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy Amara and I had sacrificed everything for. We'd worked overtime, we'd skipped vacations, we'd poured every penny we had into his college education so he could be better than us. And this was the man he had become, a coward hiding behind his wife's cruelty. "You let her do this," I said to him. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Tiffany looked at her watch. "You have 30 minutes, she said, her voice sharp, all business again. "Go upstairs, pack one bag, personal items only, clothes, photos, toiletries. The rest is being sold. The proceeds will go into a new trust account to pay for your new apartment and management fees." "Management fees," I whispered. "Of course," she said. My time is very valuable." I was defeated. I was 72 years old, my wife was dead, and my son and daughter-in-law were evicting me from my own life. I turned and walked slowly up the stairs. My legs felt like they were made of lead. As I walked, I could hear them. The sound of my life, my 50 years with Amara being scraped and dragged across the hardwood floors below. The new place was in Emeryville. Tiffany had driven me here in her sterile white Tesla. Andre followed behind in his BMW with my single duffel bag in his trunk. She called it a luxury studio. The reality was a box. A 400-square-foot room on the 3rd floor of a sprawling beige complex that smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. The luxury was a lie. It was gray laminate flooring that clicked hollowly under my feet. It was a tiny kitchenette with a stainless steel microwave and a countertop made of speckled plastic-feeling composite. And the view. My one window, which only opened 3 inches by law, looked directly at the concrete wall of the parking garage. It was so close I could see the oil stains on the pavement 3 floors below. It was a wall. They had taken my home with its garden, the one Amara had spent 30 years planting, and they had given me a wall. This wasn't a home. This was a waiting room, a place to store an old man until he was finished. "Well, here it is," Tiffany said, her voice echoing in the small, empty space. She tossed a plastic key fob onto the counter. It skittered and stopped. "This is it," I repeated, my voice flat. "It's perfect for you," she said, not registering my tone. "Clean, secure, no maintenance. You don't have to worry about a thing." Andre came in, placing my bag on the floor. It was the only thing in the room that was mine. He stood by the door, his hands in his pockets, refusing to look at me. "The rent is $2,800 a month," Tiffany said brightly, as if announcing good news. "But don't you worry your head about it. I'll pay it directly from the trust account. See, we're taking care of you just like we promised." My blood ran cold. $2,800 for this box. "That's the market rate in the Bay Area, Dad," she said, her voice taking on a familiar condescending edge. "You've been out of the loop for a while." I turned to my son. "Andre, $2,800. Andre just shrugged, his eyes fixed on the floor. "It's what it costs, Dad." "The money," I said, my throat tightening. "The money from my house. My $1.3 million house. Where is it?" "It's safe." Tiffany cut in, patting the sleek leather briefcase she always carried. "It's the principal of the new trust account. I'm the trustee. Andre and I are the beneficiaries. It's all perfectly legal, all set up to manage your expenses and our future, my expenses. Their future. My pension," I said, a new dread creeping in. "My AC Transit pension. It's over $3,500 a month. It deposits on the 1st. "Oh, don't worry about that either," she said with a dismissive wave. "We've already rerouted it. It's going to be deposited directly into the trust account as well. It makes the bookkeeping so much cleaner, consolidates everything." They left. Andre paused at the door for just a second. He opened his mouth as if to say something. I saw a flicker of the boy I used to know, the boy who used to run to me when he fell off his bike. But then Tiffany called his name from the hallway. "Andre, come on. We have that dinner reservation." He closed his mouth, turned, and walked away. The door clicked shut. The sound was so final. I stood in the center of the empty room for a long time. The silence was heavier than the silence in my old house. This was the silence of a tomb. Consolidated, rerouted, trustee, beneficiaries. These were the words they had used to steal my life. My hands were shaking. I fumbled for my old flip phone in my pocket. I had to check. I had to know. I dialed the number for the pension board first. I sat on the floor, there was no chair, and listened to the terrible hold music. Finally, a woman's voice. "AC Transit Pension Services." "Yes, my name is Julius Clayton. I'm a retiree. I need to confirm my direct deposit information for tomorrow." I gave her my employee number, my social security number. "One moment, Mr. Clayton." More clicking. "Ah, yes, I see it. We received a request for change of depository form this morning. It was submitted by your financial representative, a Mrs. Tiffany Clayton, acting as power of attorney. She did what? She changed the receiving account, sir, effective immediately. Your monthly payment of $3,540 will be deposited into a new account at a private wealth management firm." "But I didn't authorize that." "We have a legal notarized power of attorney on file, sir," the woman said, her voice turning cool and professional. "As far as we're concerned, she is you for all financial matters. Is there anything else?" I hung up without answering. My breath was short, my heart medication. I needed to refill it. How would I pay for it? I dialed the bank. My personal bank for 40 years. The automated system was a nightmare. Press 1 for, press 3 for, representative. I found myself yelling at the phone. Representative. Finally, a man's voice. "Thank you for calling Bank of America. This is Kevin. How can I help you?" "My name is Julius Clayton. I think there's a problem with my account. I need to check my balance." I gave him the numbers. The long, agonizing pause filled with keyboard tapping. "Mr. Clayton," the man's voice came back slow and cautious. I'm not seeing an active checking or savings account for you, sir." "What?" I stood up. "What do you mean I've banked with you for 40 years? I have a checking account and a savings account, a money market account. My pension, sir, according to the records here, all accounts under your name and social security number were closed as of 10:30 a.m. this morning." "Closed? I didn't close them. Where did the money go?" "The funds, sir. Let me see. Yes, the remaining balances from all 3 accounts were wired out, and the accounts were closed by your legal fiduciary, Mrs. Tiffany Clayton. The transfer was made to something called the Clayton Family Trust. We have the POA documentation on file. It all appears to be perfectly in order, sir." "In order." I hung up the phone. I had nothing, not a dollar to my name. I was 72 years old in an empty room and I had nothing. They had taken everything. The $1.3 million from my house. The pension I had earned over 4 decades of waking up at 4 a.m. The small nest egg Amara and I had saved penny by penny. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold laminate floor. I stared at the concrete wall of the parking garage. How could this happen? How could my own son? Just then my phone pinged. A sound it rarely made. It was a text message. From Tiffany. I had to squint to read the tiny screen, my hands trembling too much to hold it steady. Dad, to make things simple, I've set up an allowance for you. I will send you $400 every Monday for your incidentals. Food, gas, toiletries, things like that. This week's amount has been sent to a new debit card I'm having messengered over. It should be there in an hour. Use it wisely. Use it wisely. $400 a week. I did the math, my mind numb. My pension alone was over $3,500 a month. The rent for this cell was $2,800. They weren't just taking care of me, they were profiting from me. They were stealing my pension, using it to pay for my prison, and pocketing the extra $700 a month. And that was just the pension. That didn't even touch the $1.3 million they had stolen from the sale of my home. The humiliation was a physical sickness. It rose in my throat, hot and bitter. It was worse than the grief for Amara. Grief was clean. This was filth. This was a betrayal so cold, so calculated, I couldn't even understand it. They hadn't just thrown me out. They had erased me. They had turned my entire life, my 40 years of work, my 50 years of marriage, into a revenue stream for themselves. I looked at the debit card when it arrived, delivered by a man who looked at me with pity. $400. My allowance. I sat in the dark as the gray shadow of the parking garage filled the room. I was 72 years old. My wife was gone. My son was a stranger. And I was a prisoner being paid an allowance from my own stolen life. I knew then that this wasn't just an ending. It couldn't be. This had to be the beginning of something else. I didn't know what. But I knew I couldn't let it end like this. I couldn't let them win. 6 months passed. 6 months of staring at a concrete wall. 6 months of a silence so profound it felt like a sickness. The $400 Tiffany sent every Monday was a cruel joke. In the Bay Area, it was nothing. It was gasoline for my car. It was the copay for my heart medication, which I desperately needed as the stress made my chest tighten every night. It was cheap groceries from the grocery outlet. I learned to buy the dented cans. I learned to eat rice and beans. I learned to skip meals. The humiliation was a constant grinding weight. I was 72 years old and I was counting coins to buy a loaf of bread. I had driven a city bus for 4 decades. I had raised a son. I had paid off $1 million home. And I was now standing in a checkout line praying my debit card wouldn't be declined for a $4 purchase. I saw the pity in the cashier's eyes. I became invisible. Just another old man shuffling through the days. The little cash I'd had in my wallet when they threw me out was long gone. My meager savings account, which Tiffany had somehow missed because it was at a different credit union, was drained after the 2nd month, just paying for my prescriptions. One Tuesday morning I woke up, looked at my phone. The $400 had arrived. I looked at my kitchen counter. The bottle of lisinopril was empty. The refill was $90. My gas tank was on E. I had $3 in my pocket. I could either get my heart medication or I could eat for the rest of the week. The choice was clear. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't just sit here and let them slowly starve me to death in this gray box. I had to do something. But what my eyes fell on the single car key sitting by the door. My 2012 Toyota Camry. It was the only thing they hadn't taken. Why? Because it was in my name alone. It was old, worthless to them. A 12-year-old car with 180,000 miles on it. It wasn't worth the legal fees for Tiffany to seize. It was beneath her. But for me, it was everything. It was my only asset. It was my only escape. I sat down at the tiny table. I used my old flip phone to access the internet, a slow, painful process. I typed in the letters U, B, E, R. My hands were shaking as I filled out the online application. Julius Clayton, 2012 Toyota Camry. I had to upload a photo of my driver's license, my insurance. The humiliation was so thick I could barely breathe. I was a professional driver, a union man. I had driven for AC Transit for 40 years. I had medical benefits. I had a pension. I had respect. Now, at 72 years old, I was applying to be a gig worker. No benefits, no security, using my own car, my own gas, driving college kids and tech millionaires around for a few dollars. It was a new low, a bottom I didn't even know existed. But as I hit the submit button, I didn't just feel shame. I felt a cold, hard spark of something else. Anger. If I was going to be a driver again, so be it. I would drive. I would earn my own money. Even if it was just pennies, it would be my pennies, not the allowance she threw at me like scraps to a dog. I would be out of this room. I would be moving. And as long as I was moving, I was still alive. The app pinged. That was my new boss. A sound on a phone. I went online at 4 p.m. My back already hurt. The seats in my 2012 Camry were not designed for a 72-year-old man to sit in for 10-hour stretches. The springs were shot. I could feel a metal bar pressing into my lower spine. My first ride was in Berkeley. 4 students from the university. They piled into the back of my Toyota smelling of cheap beer and pizza. They were all talking at once, yelling over each other. Dude, I swear my poli-sci professor hates me. I'm totally gonna fail. Who cares? My dad's just gonna get me an internship at the firm anyway. They didn't say hello. They didn't even look at me. I was just the man in the front seat, part of the car, part of the app. One of them, a young woman with pink hair, leaned forward, not to talk to me, but to yell at her friend. We are not going to Chad's party. He's a total creep. Turn left here, one of the boys shouted at me. The app is wrong. Turn left. I turned left. I used to drive a 40-foot articulated bus. I was responsible for 150 lives at a time. I had a union, I had a supervisor, I had authority. When I spoke, people listened. Now I was just driver, an old black man in a cheap car being ordered around by kids who were the same age as my son Andre when I was paying for his college tuition. I dropped them off at a bar on Telegraph Avenue. They slammed the doors and didn't say thank you. The app pinged, 5 stars, a $1 tip. I drove for 3 more hours. My back was a dull, throbbing ache. I crossed the Bay Bridge, paying the $7 toll out of my own pocket, hoping for a ride in the city that would make it worthwhile. Ping. I picked up 2 men in their late 20s from a glittering glass office building in the financial district. They both wore expensive-looking headphones and carried identical laptops. They got into the back seat, and their conversation continued as if the door had never opened. I'm just saying for $250,000 a year, I shouldn't have to deal with his incompetence, the first one said. The other one sighed, tapping aggressively on his phone. I know, right, and the free snacks in the micro kitchen have been terrible this quarter, plus they only gave us a 10% bonus. 10, after we crushed our Q3 target. I gripped the steering wheel. $250,000. I listened to them complain about their bonuses. My annual pension, the one Andre and Tiffany were now stealing, was just over $42,000. A pension I had earned by waking up at 4 a.m. every morning for 40 years. A pension I had bled for. These boys were complaining about salaries that were more than I had made in 5 years combined. They were complaining about snacks. I was invisible. I was a ghost in a Toyota Camry. I was just the engine that moved them from their $250,000 job to their $4,000 a month apartment. I dropped them off. No tip. It went on like this for 6 months. Driving, my back screaming, my dignity eroding with every ride. Every ping of the app felt like a small humiliation. One night, I was finishing a long shift. My eyes were burning. I had been driving for 10 hours straight. I was exhausted. I was trying to make $150 so I could be sure to afford my heart medication refill and groceries. My last ride dropped me off in Oakland, near Berkeley. I was only a few miles from my old neighborhood. From Rockridge. I hadn't been back, not once. It hurt too much. I avoided those streets like they were poison. But tonight, I don't know what it was. The exhaustion, the deep bone-aching loneliness. I had to see it. I told myself I just wanted to see the house, to see who the new owners were, to see if they were taking care of Amara's garden. My hands were shaking as I turned onto my old street. It was dark, quiet, just like I remembered. I drove slowly. And then I saw it. My house. But it wasn't my house. It was lit up. Not just a porch light. It was glowing. There were new lights in the garden pathways. Amara's garden. The old beige paint was gone. It was now a modern, trendy dark gray with a bright yellow front door. But that wasn't what made my heart stop. It was the car, in my driveway, where my Toyota used to be. There was a brand new shiny white BMW Z4, a low-slung two-seater sports car, the kind a rich young executive would buy. I pulled my old Camry over to the curb across the street and I killed the headlights. I just sat there in the dark, watching. And then the front door opened. Laughter spilled out onto the lawn. Music. It was a party. A man stepped out onto the porch. He was holding a glass of champagne. He was laughing. It was Andre, my son. He was followed by Tiffany. She was wearing a sparkling cocktail dress. She wrapped her arm around his and kissed him on the cheek. She looked triumphant. I couldn't breathe. It all hit me at once. The house was never sold. There was no all-cash buyer. And there was no 5-day close. It was all a lie. They had staged it, the moving truck, the story about the trust. They had used my power of attorney, the one I signed when I was blind with grief, to transfer the deed to themselves. They hadn't sold the house. They had stolen it. And the money, the $1.3 million she quoted, that must have been the new mortgage they took out against the house. My house. The one I had paid off. They had leveraged my life's work to buy themselves a sports car and throw parties. They were living in my home. They were sleeping in my bedroom. They were renovating it with my stolen pension and savings. I watched Andre raise his glass in a toast to the friends I couldn't see inside. He looked happy. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had everything he ever wanted. The betrayal was so total, so complete, it was like a physical blow. They hadn't just thrown me out. They had planned it. They had executed it. And now they were celebrating. I sat there in the dark, invisible, in my old car, a ghost, watching my son and his wife dance on my grave. And in that moment, the grief I felt for Amara was completely replaced by a cold, solid rage. It was a Tuesday, a cold, gray San Francisco Tuesday. The rain wasn't just falling, it was seeping. It was a miserable, icy drizzle that blurred the windshield and matched the cold fog in my own head. Thwack thwump, thwack thwump. The wipers on my Camry were old. They were smearing the water, not clearing it. I was parked on a side street in Soma, just waiting for the next ping. My last passenger had yelled at me, a young woman in a designer rain jacket. She was angry because I'd taken a right turn instead of a left. "Your GPS is wrong," she'd snapped. "You're wasting my time. I'm late for a meeting. I'm reporting you and I'm not tipping." She slammed the door so hard my car shook. I just sat there. I didn't have the energy to be angry. I was just empty. My back was on fire. After 9 hours in this worn-out driver's seat, I could feel a broken spring in the cushion digging into my left hip. My leg was cramping. My 72-year-old body was screaming at me. I checked the app. $93. After Uber's cut, after the bridge toll, after the gas, I'd be lucky to take home $60. $60 for 9 hours of being invisible, of being yelled at. This was my life now. This was what I had become. I leaned my head against the steering wheel. The plastic was cold. I closed my eyes. Just for 1 second. Maybe I could just sleep. Right here. Just turn off the app and sleep. What would happen? Tiffany would send a nasty text about the $400 allowance. Andre would... No. Andre would do nothing. I was at the bottom. This was it. There was nowhere lower to go. Ping. My eyes snapped open. That sound. The sound of my new boss. The sound I both hated and desperately needed. I fumbled for the phone. I accepted the ride. Pick up Sansom Street, the heart of the financial district. I sighed. Another rich passenger in a hurry. I put the car in drive and pulled out into the slick street. The Camry felt like a rowboat next to the black Teslas and Escalades that surrounded me. I felt pathetic. I navigated the one-way streets and pulled up in front of a giant glass tower. The kind of building that probably cost more than the entire city of Oakland where I grew up. I double-parked, put my flashers on, and tapped Arrived on the app. I watched my mirror. A minute passed. Then a man in a black suit holding a large black umbrella walked out of the building. He wasn't my passenger. He was a chauffeur. He walked to a gleaming black Maybach parked just ahead of me. He opened the rear door. I figured he was getting his boss. But then, He looked at my car, my little 2012 Camry. He helped an old man out of the Maybach, my passenger. He was older than me. He looked to be in his mid-80s. He wore a beautiful dark wool overcoat and a gray fedora. He moved very slowly with a wooden cane. The chauffeur held the umbrella over the old man and walked him, not to the building, but to my car. My stomach twisted. This was strange. The chauffeur opened my back door, the one that squeaks. He carefully helped the old man slide in. The old man grunted with the effort. "Thank you, Michael," the old man said. His voice was a dry rasp, but it was powerful. "I will be waiting for your call, Mr. Rosenthal," the chauffeur said. He closed my door. He gave me a single brief glance through the window, a look I couldn't read, and then walked back to his billion-dollar car. I waited. "Where to, sir?" I finally asked. The old man was breathing heavily from the effort of moving. Just drive," he said. "Head toward the Presidio. I'll tell you where to go. Just drive." "Yes, sir." I pulled away from the curb. The tension in the car was immediate. My usual passengers were loud. They were on their phones. They were talking to each other. They were eating. This man, Mr. Rosenthal, was silent, and he was staring at me. I could see him in the rearview mirror. He wasn't just glancing around. He was staring at the back of my head and at my reflection in the mirror. I kept my eyes on the road. We drove for 5 minutes, up Columbus Avenue. The rain was getting heavier. I glanced in the mirror again. He was still staring. His gaze was locked on me. It was intense. It was unsettling. He was leaning forward slightly, his bright blue eyes narrowed. I could feel the skin on the back of my neck prickle. Oh, great. Another complaint. Maybe my car smells. Maybe he's angry my shocks are bad. "Is the heat okay for you back there, sir?" I asked, my professional bus driver voice. He didn't answer right away, then just, "It's fine." But the staring didn't stop. We kept driving, past Ghirardelli Square, toward the park. I could feel his eyes on me like a physical touch. It was more unnerving than the girl who had yelled at me. I risked another glance. His face was changing. He wasn't just looking, he was studying me. His mouth was slightly open. He was looking at my jawline, the shape of my nose, my eyes in the mirror. He looked pale, shaken. "Sir, are you feeling all right?" I asked, pulling up to a stoplight. He leaned forward even more. His face was only a foot or two from the back of my headrest. I could hear his breathing. It was shaky. "Forgive me," he whispered. His voice was trembling. This is a very strange question." "Okay," I said slowly. The light turned green. I started driving again. What did you say your name was?" he asked. "Julius, sir. My name is Julius Clayton." "Julius Clayton," he repeated the name. He said it slowly like he was tasting it. "Clayton." He was quiet for another block. But the tension in the car was so thick I could barely breathe. I could see him in the mirror. He was squinting, and his eyes were filling with tears. This old man was crying. "Julius Clayton," he whispered again to himself. "But it can't be. That face, that chin." He leaned forward right next to my ear. His voice was a raw, ragged whisper that cut right through the sound of the rain and the wipers. "Mr. Clayton, forgive me. Do you know anyone? Have you ever in your life known anyone by the name of Robert Hartman?" The world stopped. The rain, the wipers, the sound of the traffic, it all just faded to a dull roar. My foot spasmed on the accelerator. The car jerked. Hartman. My heart. My bad heart. It gave one giant painful thud in my chest. It felt like it had been hit. Robert Hartman. It was a name I had not heard spoken aloud in 60 years. It was the name of a ghost. It was the name my mother, my real mother, had hissed at me when I was 12 years old. I had asked her why I didn't have a father like the other boys, why my skin was dark when hers was light. His name was Robert Hartman, she had said, her face tight with a shame I didn't understand. He was no good. He left before you were born. He is gone. Your name is Clayton, and you will never speak his name again. I never did. I had buried that name. I was Julius Clayton, and now, this rich old man, this stranger in the back of my Uber, had just spoken it. I couldn't drive. I swerved the Camry to the side of the road, into a scenic turnout overlooking the dark, choppy water of the bay. I slammed the car into park so hard it rocked. My hands were shaking. I couldn't grip the wheel. I turned around in my seat. I looked at this man and really looked at him. His face was pale. Tears were rolling down his wrinkled cheeks. "How?" I whispered. My throat was dry. My voice was a croak. "How do you know that name?" He was looking at me like he'd just seen a miracle. "That," I had to force the words out. "That was my father's name." The old man's face just crumpled. "I never met him." I said, the words tumbling out of me. The 60-year-old secret. "My mother said he left. I took her name. I'm Julius Clayton." "Robert Hartman," the old man whispered. And then this stranger, this man, Mr. Rosenthal. He covered his face with his gloved hands, and he began to sob. Not just quiet tears. He was weeping. Deep, painful sounds that shook his entire body. He was crying like his heart had just broken in two. I just sat there stunned. The only sound in my car was the thwack-thwump of the wipers, and the sound of this billionaire weeping in my back seat. I sat there frozen in the driver's seat. My mind was blank. All I could hear was this old man weeping in my back seat. Finally, his sobs quieted down. He fumbled in his overcoat pocket and pulled out a clean white handkerchief. He wiped his eyes and blew his nose. He took a few deep, shuddering breaths. "I'm sorry," he finally whispered. "I'm so sorry. I have been looking for you for 40 years, Julius." "Looking for me?" "Yes. For Robert Hartman's son." He leaned forward again. His eyes were red, but now they were clear, and they were locked on mine. "My driver Michael is waiting for my call," he said, his voice regaining its strength. "He will take my car. But you are coming with me. We are not doing this." He gestured around my old Camry. "Sir, I don't—" "Turn off that app," he commanded. It wasn't a request. "Turn off the phone. Your life as an Uber driver is over, as of this second. Do you understand me?" I was too stunned to argue. I fumbled with my phone. I hit the go offline button. The app went dark. "Now," he said, "drive. Take us back to my building, the one where you picked me up, and park in the private garage. I will call my chauffeur and tell him to meet us there. We have 50 years of history to discuss, and we are not doing it in a Toyota Camry." I put the car in drive. My hands were still shaking. Who are you?" "My name," he said, sitting back, "is Benjamin Rosenthal." The name meant nothing to me. But I drove. 15 minutes later, I was in a place I had no right to be. Benjamin Rosenthal's chauffeur Michael had met us in the private underground garage. He had looked at me with a strange new respect. Mr. Rosenthal put a hand on my shoulder, and said, "Julius will be with me for some time, Michael. See that his car is taken care of, detailed, filled with gas." Then he led me to a private elevator. Now I was standing in an office that felt more like a palace. It was on the top floor, the penthouse. The walls were dark wood and glass. And the glass, it looked out over the entire city, over the fog, over the bay. I could see the Golden Gate Bridge stretching out into the ocean. It was so beautiful it didn't look real. It was the complete opposite of my gray studio apartment with its view of a concrete wall. It was the opposite of my entire life. "Please," Rosenthal said, gesturing to a deep leather chair. "Sit, Julius. Sit." He walked slowly to a small bar and poured 2 glasses of water. His hands were trembling slightly. He brought one to me. He sat in the chair opposite me. For a full minute he just looked at me, the same way he had in the car. But now his gaze wasn't just intense. It was sad. It was full of a grief I didn't understand. "You look just like him," he whispered. "Who?" "Your father," he said. "Robert. You have his eyes, his jaw. My God." I looked at you in that mirror. It was like seeing a ghost. It's been 40 years, but I saw him. You knew him," I said. "My mother. She said he was no good. She said he left us." Benjamin Rosenthal's face darkened. He put his glass down. "Your mother was wrong," he said, his voice low and hard. "She was wrong because he told her to be. He told her to disappear, to protect you." "Protect me? From what?" Rosenthal leaned forward. "Julius, what I am about to tell you is going to be very hard to hear. It's a long story. It's a story of genius and betrayal. It's the story of this company." He waved his hand at the view. "This company?" I asked. "What is this Rosenthal Hartman Enterprises?" he said. My heart skipped a beat again. "Hartman. Yes, Robert Hartman, your father. He was my partner." And then he told me. He told me about the 1960s. He was Ben Rosenthal, a young Jewish kid from New York with a head for numbers and real estate. And Robert Hartman was a young black man from Oakland, a programmer, a genius, a man who could see the future. He wasn't just a programmer, Julius, Ben said, his eyes shining with the memory. He was a visionary. He was designing systems in 1970 that companies like Google are just now perfecting. He was writing code that could predict real estate market trends. He was the smartest man I ever met. He was my best friend. They met at UC Berkeley. They had a dream. They would combine your father's technology with Ben's real estate knowledge. They would build an empire. And they did. They formed a company, Rosenthal Hartman Enterprises. But in 1972, Ben said, his voice growing quiet, "Silicon Valley, San Francisco. It wasn't what it is today. They weren't ready. The banks, the investors, they would not listen to a black CEO. They wouldn't fund a company with a black man's name on the letterhead. It was poison." "So what did you do?" "Robert, he made a sacrifice," Ben said, looking down. He was a proud man, but he was practical. He wanted the dream to live. So he told me, "Ben, you be the face. I'll be the brain. We'll tell them it's just Rosenthal Enterprises. I'll be the silent partner, the chief technical officer. We'll split it 50-50. But we will build it." So that's what they did. Ben Rosenthal became the public face. Robert Hartman worked in the background building the systems that made them millions. "But we had a third partner," Ben said. His voice turned to ice. "A man named Arthur Vance. He handled the legal side, the contracts. We trusted him, both of us. In 1979, 1980, we were on the verge of something huge. We were about to go public. We were going to be billionaires, and Robert, he was finally going to get his name on the company. He was finally going to get his credit. And then," Ben said, "Vance betrayed us. He betrayed him." Rosenthal explained that Arthur Vance had spent years creating a false paper trail. He had been stealing Robert's patents, registering them under his own name. He had created shell corporations. He had been systematically and secretly pushing Robert out of the company he had built. When Robert found out, Ben said, it was too late. Vance had leverage. He had found out about you and your mother. Robert wasn't married to her. You were his secret, his greatest joy. He kept you separate to protect you from all of this. Vance used it. He threatened to expose Robert, to ruin his reputation, to ruin your mother. He threatened you. My breath caught. He told Robert to walk away. Ben said, his voice shaking with a 40-year-old rage. Walk away with nothing. Sign over his shares, his patents, his entire stake in the company, or Vance would see to it that he and his family were taken care of. It was a threat, a real one. And my father, he did it, Ben whispered. He chose you. He chose to save his son. He came to me the night before he disappeared. He told me everything. I wanted to fight. I wanted to go to the press. But he made me promise not to. He said, Ben, they will crush us. They will crush him. He meant you. He told me he was going to disappear, that he had told your mother to take you, to change your name, to tell you he was a deadbeat, to tell you he was gone, so no one would ever look for Julius Hartman, so you could be safe. I just sat there. My whole life, my entire 72 years, was a lie. My father wasn't a deadbeat who left. He was a hero who had given up an empire to save my life. Before he left, Ben said, his eyes full of tears, he gave me something. He said, Ben, Vance and I, we are the only two who know the real truth. Vance will never tell, but I know you. You will never forget me. You are the only man I trust. He made me promise. One day, he said, my boy will be a man, and maybe one day he will find you, or you will find him. If that day ever comes, you give this to him. This is the truth. This is our justice. What? I stammered. What did he give you? Ben Rosenthal stood up slowly. He walked over to a huge painting on the wall, a painting of the Golden Gate Bridge in the fog. He pressed a hidden button. The painting clicked and swung open. Behind it was a large, old-fashioned safe, the kind with a big metal wheel. I have been waiting 40 years to open this for you, Julius, he said. I found out Robert passed away, just over a year ago. I've been searching for a Julius Clayton ever since. I was losing hope. And then today you showed up, like a miracle. He put his trembling hand on the dial, and he began to turn it. Ben Rosenthal's trembling hands turned the dial. Click, whir, click. I have to confess, Julius, he said, his voice low as he concentrated. When I heard Robert had passed a year ago, it started a clock. I didn't just search for you out of friendship. I searched out of necessity, but I was looking for the wrong name. What do you mean? I was searching for Julius Hartman, he said, his voice strained. I put private investigators on it. We searched birth records, social security databases. Nothing. We found your mother's name, Clayton, but the trail went cold. I assumed the worst. That maybe Vance had found you both, or that you had, I don't know. Click. I never imagined you were hiding in plain sight. Julius Clayton. He hid you. He hid you so well. Right here in Oakland, driving a bus. He shook his head, his eyes full of a strange pity that I was only just beginning to understand. I've seen you. I must have seen you. On the street. Maybe I even rode your bus once. And I never knew. The dial stopped. There was a heavy thunk as the tumblers aligned. Ben Rosenthal gripped the heavy metal handle. He pulled. There was a hiss of air, the sound of a 40-year-old seal breaking. The safe door groaned open on its heavy hinges. I found myself holding my breath. I was still standing. I felt dizzy as if I were floating. Ben reached into the darkness of the safe. The smell of old paper and dust filled the luxurious office. He said to me, Ben, they can steal my patents. They can steal my name. They can steal my shares. But they can't steal the truth, and they can't steal what's in your head. Ben pulled out a small, simple manila envelope. It was brittle with age. He wanted you to have this first, Ben said, his voice thick with emotion. He handed the envelope to me. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open the flap. It wasn't sealed. Inside there was only one item, a small black and white photograph. The corners were soft. I slid it out. It was a picture of a young man, a black man. He was probably in his late 20s. He was wearing a simple button-down shirt. He was leaning against a 1960s-era car. He wasn't smiling. He was grinning. A wide, joyful grin full of life and confidence. He was handsome. He was brilliant. And I was looking in a mirror. It was me. It was my face, my chin, my nose, the eyes. They were my eyes. It was the face I saw in the mirror every morning. but without the 72 years of grief and disappointment. It was the face of a man who believed he could build an empire. My God, I whispered. That's him, Ben said softly. That's Robert, your father. I sank into the leather chair. I couldn't stand anymore. I couldn't take my eyes off the picture. 72 years. For 72 years I had been a ghost, a man with no past, a man who came from no good. For 72 years I had carried a secret shame, the shame of being the boy whose father had left him. And now, here he was. He was real. And he looked like me. All the anger I'd felt toward him my whole life, it just evaporated. It was replaced by a profound and overwhelming sadness, a loss so deep I could feel it in my bones. I had missed him. I had missed my entire life with him. He was a good man, Julius, Ben said, as if reading my mind. He was the best of us. I nodded, still unable to speak. I carefully, so carefully, slid the photograph into my shirt pocket. I placed my hand over it, over my heart. There's more, Ben said. He reached back into the safe. This time he pulled out a much larger envelope, a legal document envelope bound with a red string. It was thick. He placed it on the desk in front of me. The label was typed on an old-fashioned typewriter. Rosenthal Hartman Enterprises, Founding Partners Agreement. My hand trembled as I untied the string. I opened the flap and pulled out the contents. It was heavy, thick embossed paper. I was looking at stock certificates, one after another. Certificate number 1, Rosenthal Hartman Enterprises. This certifies that Robert Hartman is the owner of 1,000 shares, founding partner. Certificate number 2, this certifies that Robert Hartman is the owner of... It went on and on. I looked at the final page, a summary document, signed by Robert Hartman and Benjamin Rosenthal, witnessed by Arthur Vance, the signature of the man who had betrayed him. What is this? I whispered. I thought he made him sign it all away. He did, Ben said, his voice now cold. Vance thought he had all the original shares. He thought Robert had signed them all over. But Robert was smarter than that. What he gave Vance were duplicates, forgeries. He told Vance the originals had been lost in a fire. Vance believed him, because Vance was arrogant. He thought he had won. Ben pointed to the stack of certificates in my hands. Those are the originals, the controlling shares. Legally, they were never signed over. They were never sold. They have been sitting in this safe for 40 years. What does it mean? Ben's face was grim. It means that Arthur Vance, and now his son who runs the company, their entire ownership, their entire claim to this company, is based on fraud, on forged documents. He pointed to the certificates. According to the original corporate charter, those shares represent 25%. He waved his hand at the city skyline outside the window. 25% of all of this building, the real estate in Chicago, the data centers in Virginia. 25% of a $12 billion corporation. $3 billion. I couldn't process the number. It wasn't real. $3 billion. I was driving for Uber to make $93. My mind just shut down. But Ben, I stammered, if this is true, why didn't you? Because Vance had the threat, Ben said. As long as Vance was alive, and Robert was alive, we couldn't use them. Robert was too afraid of what Vance would do to you, so we waited. And then Vance died. And Robert got sick, he lost his way, he just gave up. By the time I found out he was gone, it was too late. I stared at the stock certificates. My name, Hartman, my inheritance. I was a billionaire. I started to laugh. It was a strange, dry sound. I thought about Tiffany. I thought about Andre. I thought about my $400 allowance. I thought about my gray box in Emeryville. I was a billionaire. It's not even the best part, Ben said. I looked up. What? There's one more thing, Ben said. He reached into the very back of the dark safe. He pulled out one last document. It wasn't like the stock certificates. It wasn't thick. It wasn't embossed. It was just a few pages. Old legal paper, yellowed and folded. The typewriting on it was faded. It looked unimportant. "What is that?" I asked. Ben Rosenthal didn't smile. He looked strategic. He looked like the billionaire he was. "This, Julius, this is the real genius of your father. This is the part Vance never knew about. This is the part no one knew about except me. And now, you." He unfolded the paper. "This," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "is the ground lease for the land that this building is standing on." I stared at the folded yellow paper. It looked like nothing. It looked like trash. "I don't understand, Ben," I said. "A ground lease? What? What does that mean?" Ben Rosenthal sat down. He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, he smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator. It was the smile of a man who had just laid the perfect trap. "Julius," he said, "I told you your father was a genius. He wasn't just a genius with code. He was a genius with revenge. He knew Vance would betray him. He felt it coming, months before it happened. He knew Vance was smarter at law than he was, so he couldn't fight him on the shares alone. He knew Vance would find a way to steal the company. So, your father, he prepared a poison pill, a time bomb." He tapped the yellow document. "What do you do when you know your partners are about to steal your company from you?" Ben asked. I shook my head. I don't know. Sue them." "No," Ben said. "Because you know they'll win. They've covered their tracks. So you do something else. You do something fundamental. You take away the one thing they can't move, the one thing they can't hide." He pointed down at the floor. "The land," he whispered. Months before the betrayal, while Vance was busy creating his fake paper trail, your father, Robert, was quietly cashing out his own personal stocks. He took every dollar he had, and he did something Vance never thought to check. He bought the parcel of land, the very piece of earth we are sitting on right now. This block, in the heart of San Francisco. My mind couldn't grasp it. He bought the land with his own money under a shell corporation that only he and I knew about, Ben said. And then, 2 weeks later, he presented a proposal to the company, to Rosenthal Hartman Enterprises. He said, "I've found the perfect spot for our new headquarters. My shell corp owns it. I will lease it to our company." Vance and we thought it was a brilliant move, a standard real estate deal. Your father leased this land to his own company for 99 years. The cost, Ben smiled, $100 per year. Vance was thrilled. He thought Robert was a fool. He was getting this priceless piece of San Francisco land for free. He signed the lease without even reading the fine print. Because he was arrogant, he was already planning his betrayal. He didn't care about a simple land lease. But your father, Robert, he knew Vance wouldn't read it, and he put something special in that fine print. Ben stood up and walked to the glass window. He looked down at the city lights far below. He put in a clause, a simple succession clause. It's on page 3. I've had it memorized for 40 years. He turned to look at me. The clause states, Ben recited, that this 99-year lease and all property built upon the land, that means this entire 40-story skyscraper, will remain the property of the company, unless, in the event of the death of the primary leaseholder Robert Hartman, the company fails to identify and make good faith contact with his legal heir. He paused. Within 12 calendar months of the date of his passing, I just stared at him. I was still lost. What happens if they fail? Ben's smile widened. If they fail to contact the heir, After 12 months, the lease is immediately rendered null and void, and all property, all assets built on the land automatically revert, free and clear, to the legal owner of the land. He pointed at me. To you, Julius. I still didn't get it. But they could just contact me. Could they? Ben asked. They don't know you exist. Vance is dead. His son, the idiot who runs the company now, he doesn't know the first thing about this. He thinks the company owns this building outright. He has no idea that he is a tenant. And Robert Hartman, your father, as I told you, he passed away. When? I whispered. When did he die? Ben looked at his watch. He passed away 13 months. And 1 week ago. The room tilted. 13 months. Yes. Which means the 12-month deadline. It expired, I whispered. It expired. Last week. Ben Rosenthal walked over. He put his hands on my shoulders. I was shaking. Julius, he said, his voice a low, intense thunder. Forget the 25%. That's a legal fight. That's complicated. This is simple. This is ironclad. This is a real estate contract, and it has been breached. As of 7 days ago, Arthur Vance Jr. and the entire $12 billion corporation he runs, they are squatting. They don't own this building anymore. He pointed at me. You do. You, Julius Hartman Clayton, you are not a billionaire. You are a landlord, and you are the new owner of the entire Rosenthal Hartman World headquarters, legally, factually, completely. I couldn't speak. I looked at my hands, the hands that had gripped the steering wheel of a 2012 Toyota Camry this morning, the hands that had been counting coins for groceries. I thought of Tiffany. I thought of Andre. I thought of my gray room. I thought of my $400 allowance. And I started to laugh. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. I sat in Ben Rosenthal's penthouse office. I had been laughing. But the laughter was gone now. It was replaced by a silence so cold it felt like the fog outside the window had seeped into the room. The man who had wept in my back seat was gone. The old broken Uber driver was gone too. I was Julius Hartman Clayton, and I was no longer a victim. I was a force. I was the justice my father never got. I was the bomb he had planted 40 years ago, and I had just gone off. Ben was watching me. He saw the change in my eyes. The grief was still there, but now it had a purpose. It had been forged into something hard, something sharp. What do we do now, Julius? Ben asked. His voice was quiet. I looked at the yellowed ground lease. I looked at the billion-dollar stock certificates. Now, I said. My voice sounded different. It was deeper. It didn't tremble. Now, we make the first move. The next morning, I was not driving my Camry. I was in Ben Rosenthal's private car sitting in the back office of the most expensive law firm in San Francisco. The name on the door was one I had only seen in newspapers. Ben had made one call. He said, "I'm coming in, and I'm bringing Robert Hartman's son." We sat at a long, polished table. Across from us were 5 lawyers who looked like they ate other lawyers for breakfast. Ben explained the situation. He laid out the documents. The head lawyer, a woman named Ms. Alvarez, just stared at the ground lease. She read it once. She read it twice. She looked up at me and a slow smile spread across her face, the same smile I had seen on Ben's. "Mr. Clayton," she said, "this is the most beautiful legal document I have ever seen. It's a masterpiece." "So it's real?" I asked. "It is an ironclad executed contract," she said, "and its terms have been unequivocally breached. The building is yours." "Good," I said. "Here is what we are going to do." Step 1 was not a lawsuit, it was a letter. A simple letter from Ms. Alvarez's firm. It was hand-delivered by a courier that afternoon to Mr. Arthur Vance Jr., the current CEO of Rosenthal Hartman Enterprises, the son of the man who had betrayed my father. The letter was very polite. It was an eviction notice. It stated that as of 12 months past the death of Robert Hartman, the ground lease for the property at 1 Sansom Street was now null and void. It stated that all assets on the land, namely the 40-story skyscraper, had reverted to the landowner Mr. Julius Hartman Clayton. It informed Mr. Vance that he and his $12 billion company were now illegally trespassing, and it gave him 48 hours to vacate the premises. Ben Rosenthal had contacts inside the company. He described the scene to me later. When Arthur Vance Jr. read that letter, he laughed. He thought it was a joke, a prank. He told his assistant to shred it. His assistant told him, "Sir, this letter is from our law firm, the one we pay millions a year to." Vance stopped laughing. He called his legal department. They checked the county records. They found the original lease. They read page 3. Ben said you could hear the screaming from the hallway. Chaos. Panic. The board members were called out of golf games. The stock price. If this got out, the company would collapse. They weren't just tenants. They were homeless. But I wasn't finished. While that fire was burning, I started another. I hired a different law firm. A smaller, meaner firm. Specialists. At 4:00 p.m. that same day, a processor walked up to the bright yellow door of my old house in Rockridge. He served my daughter-in-law, Tiffany Clayton. Tiffany looked at the papers and she laughed too, just like Vance Jr. She thought it was a joke, some pathetic attempt from the old man she'd thrown out. Then she read the words: civil complaint, elder financial abuse, fraud, unlawful seizure of assets, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit didn't just name her. It named my son Andre. It named the bank that had allowed the illegal transfer. It named the title company that had handled the fraudulent deed transfer. And as she was reading that, at 4:05 p.m., her phone pinged. It was an alert from her bank. A judge had signed an emergency order. Because of the clear evidence of fraud, the court had frozen all of her assets. The new trust account, their joint checking account, the illegal mortgage they'd taken out on my house, even Andre's paycheck, everything, frozen. The new BMW Z4. The bank was on its way to repossess it. The party was over. At 9:00 a.m. the next morning my phone rang. Not my old flip phone, a new one Ben had given me. It was Ms. Alvarez. "Mr. Clayton," she said, "Mr. Vance Jr. is in our lobby. He is extremely motivated to have a meeting, as in right now." "Tell him I'm busy," I said. He is willing to fly anywhere. "No, I'm busy," I said again. "I'm driving." I was driving my old Camry. I had gone online one last time. I was driving back to my old neighborhood in Oakland. I made them wait for 2 days. The meeting was held in the penthouse, my father's office. Arthur Vance Jr. was a pale, sweaty man in a suit that cost more than my car. He looked like he hadn't slept in 48 hours. His lawyers looked terrified. I was not wearing my Uber driver's jacket. Ben had bought me a suit, a dark gray custom-tailored suit. I felt powerful. I looked like my father's son. I sat at the head of the table. Ben sat to my right, Ms. Alvarez to my left. "Mr. Clayton," Vance stammered, This is all a terrible misunderstanding, a clerical error." I said nothing. I just stared at him, the way he had stared at me in my Uber, with contempt. We are prepared to offer you a very generous sum," he said, to correct this error, to buy the land from you. Name your price. 5 million. 10 million. I let the silence stretch. Finally, I spoke. "I don't want your $10 million. Vance looked relieved. "Oh, good, good. Then what?" "I don't want the land," I said. "And I don't want this building. I don't want to be a landlord." You don't..." "No," I said. "I want something more. I want what you stole." I slid the original stock certificates across the table. Vance's face went white. "Your father," I said, "built this company. Your father stole it. You have been living off my father's genius your entire life. That ends today." Here's the deal, I said. You don't want to be homeless. I don't want your building. 1. You will buy these shares. My 25%. You will buy them at today's full and fair market value, not a discount. My lawyers and your lawyers will agree on a price, and it won't be $3 billion. After we've reassessed the intellectual property your father stole, it will be closer to 8. Vance looked like he was going to be sick. 2, I continued. My house, in Rockridge. Your company put a mortgage on it. I don't know how you did it, I don't care. You will clear that debt, you will pay it off, and you will sign the deed back over to me, free and clear, by 5 p.m. today. But how? That's your problem, I said. And 3, I leaned forward. You will hold a press conference, and you will announce that this company is being renamed. Today. It is now, and will be forever, Hartman Rosenthal Enterprises. My father's name, I said, will be on the building, it will be on your letterhead, it will be on your website. You will publicly acknowledge him as the co-founder and the chief architect of this entire company. You will give him back the legacy you and your father stole. Vance looked at his lawyers. They just nodded. He was trapped. That, I said, is the price for the land. You do those 3 things, and I will sign the lease over to you for $100 a year, my father's price. I stood up. You have 1 hour to decide. I drove back to Rockridge that evening. I parked the Camry across the street, but I didn't hide. I got out and walked up the pathway. The bright yellow front door of my house was wide open, but the party was over. There was no music. There was no laughter. Instead, there were cardboard boxes piled on the lawn. Andre and Tiffany were scrambling frantically in the twilight. The white BMW Z4 was gone. A tow truck was in the driveway pulling Andre's other car, the sedan, onto its flatbed. The bank had moved faster than they had. They looked broken, panicked. They were throwing clothes and laptops into suitcases right there on the grass. Tiffany saw me first. Her expensive clothes were wrinkled. Her perfect blonde hair was a mess. Her face was red and streaked with tears. But the hatred, that was still there. You, she shrieked. What are you doing here? Get out! Get out of my house! She actually lunged at me, trying to push me off the porch. I didn't move. I just looked at her. I stepped past her. I walked into my old living room. It was empty. They had sold all of my furniture, all of Amara's things, but they hadn't had time to replace them. The room was just a hollow box. I took a single folded document from the pocket of my new suit. It was the new deed. Clean, paid for, my name on the title. I placed it on the mantel of the fireplace. Actually, I said, my voice was calm. It echoed in the empty house. It's my house. I took it back. The debt is cleared. The title is in my name. And you too, you have 24 hours to leave. Tiffany just stared at the paper. She was vibrating with rage and confusion. No. The bank. The accounts are frozen. You can't. This isn't. But Andre, my son, he finally understood. He stumbled forward and he collapsed. He fell to his knees on the hardwood floor. He grabbed the leg of my pants like a small child. Dad, he sobbed. He was a 40-year-old man weeping at my feet. Dad, please don't. We have nothing. The bank. They froze everything. We're broke. We have nowhere to go. Please, Dad, don't do this. I looked down at him. I waited for the anger, for the rage, for the desire for revenge. But there was nothing. I didn't feel anger. I just felt empty. A deep, profound disappointment. I know you have nowhere to go, I said. I reached into my other pocket. I am not going to throw you on the street. I am not like you. I pulled out a single key, the plastic key fob for the gray studio apartment in Emeryville. I tossed it on the floor in front of him. That's the key to the studio, I said. I paid the rent for 6 months. It's all you'll need. He looked up at me, his face a mask of confusion. I reached into my wallet. I took out 4 $100 bills. I dropped them on the floor on top of the key. What's this? He whispered. It's this week's allowance, I said. Learn to live on it. I turned around. I walked past Tiffany, who was just standing there speechless, her mouth open. I walked out my front door. I left them there in the middle of the empty, echoing room. I closed the door behind me. The click of the lock was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I didn't get in my car. I walked around the side of the house, into the backyard, into Amara's garden. It was overgrown, but the roses were still trying to bloom. I was 72 years old. I had lost my wife. I had found my father. And finally, I had found myself. What I learned from this entire ordeal is that your worth is not defined by your bank account or by how others see you. I was treated as worthless, an old man to be thrown away. But even when I was invisible, I was still the son of a genius. This story teaches us that the truth has a way of surviving even when it's buried for decades. True strength isn't about anger or revenge. It's about patience, intelligence, and reclaiming your dignity by making sure justice is finally served. Did you see that final twist with the ground lease coming? Let me know what you think of my father's brilliant plan in the comments below.